Maya Rodriguez stepped off the transport shuttle and looked up at the massive glass building that stretched toward the artificial sky of Haven Prime Station. Nexus Corporate Solutions occupied 50 floors of the central tower, and today she would either get her dream job or go back to Earth with nothing but debt from her diplomatic academy training. She checked her reflection in the shuttle window one last time. Black blazer, white shirt, dark pants, and comfortable black shoes. Professional and clean, just like they taught her at the academy. Her mother had wanted her to buy something fancier, but Maya believed that good work mattered more than expensive clothes. The lobby of Nexus Corporate Solutions made her feel very small. Beings from dozens of different worlds moved through the space with purpose and confidence. Tall reptilian creatures wore flowing robes covered in golden threads. Crystalline beings sparkled in elaborate wrappings that looked like they cost more than Maya's entire education. Floating jellyfish-like aliens drifted past in clouds of expensive perfume that changed colors as they moved. Maya walked to the reception desk where a being that looked like living crystal sat behind a curved metal surface. His name plate read, "Clicks," in several different scripts. When he looked up at her, she saw his expression change from professional politeness to barely hidden disgust. "You are here for the junior negotiator position," Click said, making it sound like a statement rather than a question. His voice carried the tone of someone who had already decided she was not worth his time. "Yes, I have an appointment with Director Park at 2 o'clock, Maya replied, keeping her voice steady despite the way other beings in the lobby had started to stare at her. Clicks looked her up and down slowly, taking in every detail of her simple outfit. "I see. Please wait here while I inform the director that the candidate has arrived." He spoke the word candidate like it tasted bad in his mouth. Maya sat in one of the waiting chairs and tried not to listen to the whispered conversations happening around her. She caught fragments in Universal Standard, the trade language most species used for business. "Look at what the human is wearing," said a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "No family colors, no status markers, no ceremonial elements at all," replied another voice, deeper and more musical. "How does she expect to represent important clients dressed like a maintenance worker?" added a third voice with a slight hissing sound. Maya felt her cheeks grow warm, but she kept her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She had worked too hard to get this interview to let rude comments shake her confidence. While she waited, she used the time to study the different species around her, mentally cataloging their apparent cultural markers and behavior patterns. This kind of observation was exactly what made humans good at diplomatic work, even if the other species did not understand it yet. A Zealand in elaborate scaled wrappings approached the reception desk, and Clicks immediately stood and bowed deeply. The Zealand wore what looked like armor made from precious metals, with family crests and achievement symbols covering every surface. When he spoke to Clicks, his voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I require a meeting with Director Park immediately," the Zealand announced. "Of course, Ambassador Vex. I will arrange that right away," Clicks replied, his entire manner changing to deep respect. Maya watched this interaction and understood something important about how this office worked. Status and appearance mattered tremendously to these beings, and her simple human clothing marked her as someone without importance or respect. "Ambassador Vex," came a new voice from across the lobby. Maya turned to see a human man in a simple navy blue suit walking toward them. He moved with quiet confidence, not rushing but clearly focused. This had to be Director Park. "James, good to see you," Ambassador Vex replied, his tone warming considerably. "Always a pleasure." "I assume you are here about the Kepler 7 contract," Director Park said, shaking the ambassador's hand in the human fashion rather than attempting any elaborate Zealand greeting ritual. "Indeed. We have concerns about the timeline," Ambassador Vex replied. "Let me get someone to review the details with you right away," Director Park said, then glanced toward the reception desk. His eyes met Maya's for a moment, and she saw something flicker across his expression. Director Park excused himself from Ambassador Vex and walked over to where Maya sat waiting. Up close, she could see that his suit was well made but not flashy, and his manner was direct rather than ceremonial. "Maya Rodriguez," he said, extending his hand for a simple handshake. "Thank you for coming today." "Thank you for considering me, Director Park," Maya replied, standing and shaking his hand firmly. Director Park looked at her for a long moment, and Maya had the strange feeling that he was seeing something the other beings in the lobby had missed. His gaze was evaluating but not judgmental, professional but not cold. "Tell me, what do you think of our lobby?" he asked quietly. Maya glanced around at the elaborate displays of wealth and status, the complex social hierarchies playing out in every interaction, the careful dance of ceremony and protocol that seemed to govern every movement. "It is very impressive," she said carefully. "I can see that your clients value tradition and formal recognition of status. But I also notice that all this ceremony might sometimes get in the way of actually solving problems." Director Park smiled, and Maya realized she had just passed some kind of test she had not known she was taking. "Clicks," Director Park called to the reception desk. "Please prepare the paperwork for Ms. Rodriguez." "Sir," Clicks replied, confusion clear in his crystalline features. "But the interview has not yet taken place." "Hire her," Director Park said simply. "Right now." The lobby went very quiet. Even Ambassador Vex looked surprised by this sudden decision. "Director Park," Click said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss the candidate's presentation and whether she meets our professional standards for client interaction." Director Park looked at Clicks steadily. "Ms. Rodriguez meets exactly the professional standards we need. Please prepare her employment documents immediately." Maya felt like the floor had shifted under her feet. Around the lobby, she could see other beings staring at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. "Sir, if I may," Ambassador Vex interjected politely, "the young human seems underdressed for a position that requires interaction with high-level diplomatic personnel." Director Park turned to the ambassador with a smile. "Ambassador, I believe you will find that Ms. Rodriguez approaches diplomatic challenges in ways that will surprise and delight our clients. Sometimes the most effective solutions come from the most unexpected directions." Maya realized that her new boss had just thrown her into the deep end of interstellar diplomacy, and every being in that lobby would be watching to see if she would sink or swim. Maya's first day at Nexus Corporate Solutions started with Clicks handing her a datapad and a look that clearly said he expected her to fail spectacularly. The other alien staff members gathered around the reception area, pretending to work while obviously waiting to see what would happen to the inappropriately dressed human. "This is the Hegemony Trade Alliance file," Clicks announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. 6 species, 12 different cultural protocols, and a multi-billion credit terraforming contract that is about to collapse completely. 3 of our most experienced negotiators have already failed to resolve the dispute. Maya took the datapad and began scrolling through the information. The Hegemony Trade Alliance wanted to terraform 15 new worlds for colonization, but the project had stalled because the species could not agree on basic ecological priorities. Each species insisted that their specific needs should take precedence in the design process. "The Corvin need high-gravity worlds with metallic soil for their industrial agriculture," Maya read aloud, still studying the pad. "The Melodians require worlds with specific crystalline formations for their art colonies. The Fenari need extensive water systems for their aquatic settlements." "Yes," Click said with satisfaction, "and the Lumins need constant energy sources, the Thex need specific atmospheric gases, and the Vorthan require extensive underground tunnel systems. 6 different species with completely incompatible requirements, and they are threatening to withdraw from the entire project unless someone finds a solution by tomorrow." Around the lobby, Maya could see other staff members watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. She understood that this was designed to be an impossible test, the kind of problem that would send her running back to Earth with her confidence shattered. Maya spent the next 4 hours reading every detail of the case file, ignoring the whispered conversations and pointed looks from her new colleagues. The more she read, the more she understood why the previous negotiators had failed. They had all tried to approach the problem by finding compromises between the different cultural requirements, attempting to balance 6 different sets of priorities in some kind of diplomatic middle ground. But compromise was not what these species needed, Maya realized. They needed innovation. By late afternoon, Maya had requested a meeting with all 6 Hegemony Trade Alliance representatives. Clicks announced this with obvious glee, clearly expecting the meeting to end with Maya's immediate resignation. "The representatives will arrive tomorrow morning," Clicks informed her. "I have prepared Conference Room 7, which features the proper ceremonial arrangements for high-level diplomatic negotiations." Maya walked to Conference Room 7 and found an elaborate space with 6 different seating areas, each designed according to the cultural preferences of one species. Corvin military banners hung next to Melodian crystal art installations, while Fenari water features competed with Vorthan stone carvings for wall space. The room looked like a museum exhibition rather than a practical meeting space. "I will use Conference Room 2 instead," Maya told Klix. "Conference Room 2 has no ceremonial features at all," Klix protested. "It is just a plain room with a table and chairs." "Perfect," Maya replied. The next morning, Maya wore the same black blazer and white shirt she had worn for her interview. She arrived at Conference Room 2 an hour early and spent the time setting up a simple presentation display with clear charts and data projections. No ceremonial objects, no cultural symbols, just information arranged in a way that anyone could understand quickly. When the 6 representatives arrived, their reaction was immediate and negative. The Corvan delegate, a massive being in elaborate battle armor, looked around the plain room with obvious disapproval. The Melodian representative, whose crystalline body reflected rainbows of color, made a sound like breaking glass that Maya interpreted as offense. The other delegates appeared equally disturbed by the lack of ceremonial recognition. "This is highly irregular," announced the Vorthan representative, his voice echoing from deep within his tunnel-adapted body. "Where are the proper acknowledgments of rank and status? Where are the ceremonial elements that show respect for our respective cultures?" Maya stood at the front of the room, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that looked military in its simplicity. "I am here to solve your terraforming problem, not to conduct a ceremony. You have 15 worlds that need to be prepared for colonization, and you are currently facing project cancellation because no one has been able to design ecosystems that meet all your requirements." "Young human," the Lumine representative said, its voice like music made from pure energy, "you clearly do not understand the complexity of interspecies negotiation. Cultural sensitivity is paramount in any successful diplomatic solution." "I understand cultural sensitivity perfectly," Maya replied. "I also understand that your cultures will be much better served by worlds that actually work than by negotiations that follow perfect protocol but produce no results." Maya activated her presentation display, and the room filled with detailed ecological models. Instead of trying to show how each species' requirements could be compromised or balanced against the others, her presentation showed something entirely different. "Your species have spent months arguing about whose needs should take priority," Maya said, pointing to the displays. "But you have been asking the wrong question. The question is not whose needs matter more. The question is how your different needs can work together to create better worlds than any of you could build alone." The Corvan delegate leaned forward, his interest clearly caught despite his initial disapproval of the setting. "Explain this concept." Maya smiled and began walking through her presentation. "The Corvan need metallic soils for your industrial agriculture. The Melodian need specific mineral formations for your art colonies. But those two requirements are not competing with each other, they are complementary. Corvan industrial agriculture produces specific metal byproducts that, when processed correctly, create exactly the crystalline formations that inspire Melodian art." The Melodian representative made a sound like singing crystal. "Continue." "The Fenari need extensive water systems, and the Theks need specific atmospheric gases. But Fenari aquatic settlements produce waste gases that, when properly processed, become exactly the atmospheric components the Theks require. Meanwhile, Theks industrial processes produce water purification byproducts that create better aquatic environments than natural systems." Maya continued through each species combination, showing how every set of requirements could enhance rather than compete with every other set. The Lumine energy needs could be met through power generation that used Vorthan tunnel systems as geothermal resources. The Vorthan tunnel networks could be designed to accommodate the water flow patterns that Fenari settlements required. "What you are describing," the Vorthan representative said slowly, "is not compromise between our cultures. You are describing synthesis that makes each culture more successful than they would be in isolation." "Exactly," Maya replied. "Instead of 6 different types of colony worlds that each work adequately for one species, you can build 15 integrated worlds that work brilliantly for all 6 species." The room had gone completely quiet. Maya could see the representatives looking at each other with expressions she was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of excitement and possibility. "The engineering challenges would be significant," the Corvan delegate said, but his tone had changed from skeptical to interested. "The artistic possibilities would be unprecedented," added the Melodian representative. "The ecological complexity would be fascinating," said the Fenari delegate. Maya nodded. Complex, but not impossible. And the results would give each of your species opportunities that none of you could achieve alone. By the end of the meeting, the 6 representatives were no longer arguing about whose cultural priorities should take precedence. They were collaborating enthusiastically about implementation details, sharing technical knowledge, and planning joint research projects that would benefit all their species. As they filed out of the plane conference room, Maya heard the Corvan delegate speaking to the Melodian representative about artistic applications for military engineering, while the Fenari and Thex delegates discussed ecological innovations neither species had previously considered. Maya packed up her simple presentation materials and walked back to the lobby, where she found every member of the alien staff waiting for her with expressions of barely concealed shock. 3 weeks after the Hegemony Trade Alliance success, Maya had become the most requested negotiator at Nexus Corporate Solutions, and Clix was having trouble understanding why. The crystalline receptionist watched her walk through the lobby each morning in the same simple black blazer and white shirt, greeting everyone with the same straightforward politeness, and he could not figure out what made her so effective. The other alien staff members were equally confused. Maya broke every rule of proper diplomatic protocol. She used plain conference rooms instead of ceremonial spaces. She wore the same unremarkable outfit to every meeting regardless of which species she was dealing with. She focused on practical problems instead of cultural sensitivities. By every standard they understood, she should have been a complete failure. Instead, she was succeeding at cases that had stumped experienced negotiators for months. Clix decided to observe Maya's methods more closely when she took on the Corvan Melodian mining dispute. This case had been sitting in the files for 8 months because no one could find any middle ground between the militaristic Corvan Empire and the artistic Melodian collective. The two species had completely opposite approaches to everything, and their conflict over mineral rights on the Kepler-7 system seemed absolutely impossible to resolve. Previous negotiators had tried cultural exchange programs, joint ceremonial events, and elaborate compromise proposals that attempted to balance Corvan strength values with Melodian beauty values. All of these approaches had failed because they required one or both species to act against their fundamental nature. Maya scheduled individual meetings with each side first, and Clix made sure to position himself where he could observe her methods. What he saw surprised him completely. When Maya met with General Rex of the Corvan Empire, she did not try to soften his military mindset or encourage him to appreciate Melodian art. Instead, she focused on understanding exactly what the Corvan wanted to accomplish with the mineral resources they were fighting over. "General Rex, tell me about the monuments you plan to build with the Kepler-7 minerals," Maya said, sitting across from the massive armored being without any attempt at military ceremony or formal protocol. "We will construct the greatest military monuments in galactic history," General Rex replied, his voice carrying the pride of a warrior culture. "Towers that demonstrate Corvan engineering superiority, fortresses that showcase our tactical brilliance, and memorials that honor our greatest battlefield victories." Maya nodded and took notes on a simple data pad. "These monuments will be permanent installations that represent Corvan culture for thousands of years. They need to be not just strong, but so impressive that other species will look at them and immediately understand Corvan capabilities." "Precisely," General Rex said, clearly pleased that someone understood the importance of the project. Maya's next meeting was with artist Prime Lyra of the Melodian Collective, and Clix watched her use the same direct approach. No attempts to blend cultures or find artistic common ground with military thinking, just clear focus on understanding what the Melodians actually wanted. "Artist Prime Lyra, explain to me how the Kepler-7 crystalline formations inspire your people's art," Maya said. The translucent Melodian's body shifted through colors that Clix recognized as deep emotion. "The crystals sing to us in harmonies that no other materials can produce. They grow in patterns that reveal mathematical beauty hidden in natural processes. Our greatest works of art emerge from our connection to these living mineral formations. And if the Corvan mining operations proceed as currently planned, these formations will be destroyed," Maya stated. "Completely destroyed," Artist Prime Lyra confirmed, her colors shifting to darker shades that indicated profound sadness. "Thousands of years of natural crystal growth, gone forever to build monuments to war." Clix expected Maya to spend her time trying to find some kind of compromise that would partially satisfy both species while fully satisfying neither. This was the standard approach that had failed every previous negotiator. Instead, Maya called a joint meeting for the following day, and once again she chose the plain conference room too instead of any ceremonial space. When General Rex and Artist Prime Lyra arrived, They took positions on opposite sides of the room and glared at each other with obvious hostility. The tension was so thick that Clix could feel it from his position outside the conference room. Maya stood at the front of the room with a simple presentation display, wearing her standard professional outfit, looking completely unbothered by the hostile atmosphere. General Rex, you want to build monuments that will demonstrate Corvin's superiority for thousands of years, Maya began. Artist Prime Lyra, you want to preserve crystalline formations that represent thousands of years of natural beauty. Both of you are thinking too small. Both delegates started to object, but Maya continued without pause. General Rex, what if your monuments could be not just the greatest military constructions in galactic history, but the most beautiful constructions in galactic history? What if Corvin engineering could create something so stunning that other species would travel across the galaxy just to see what your people built? General Rex paused in his objection, clearly intrigued despite himself. Artist Prime Lyra, what if instead of preserving existing crystal formations, Melodian artists could guide the creation of new crystal formations more beautiful than anything that has ever existed naturally? What if your art could shape living mineral growth in ways that have never been attempted before? Artist Prime Lyra's colors shifted to shades that indicated intense interest. Maya activated her presentation display, showing detailed plans that Clix had never seen before. What I am proposing is not mining that destroys the crystals, and not preservation that prevents construction. What I am proposing is collaborative crystal shaping that turns the mining process itself into an art form. The display showed architectural plans that looked like nothing Clix had ever seen. Corvin engineering techniques were being used not to extract crystals from their natural formations, but to guide their growth into new shapes that had never existed in nature. The Corvin get their materials and the satisfaction of the most challenging engineering project in galactic history, Maya explained. The Melodians get to participate in creating entirely new forms of crystal art that surpass anything possible through natural processes alone. General Rex leaned forward, studying the engineering specifications. This level of precision construction would require skills that no other species possesses. It would be a demonstration of Corvin technical superiority unlike anything ever attempted. Artist Prime Lyra's colors had shifted to brilliant golds and silvers that indicated excitement beyond normal Melodian emotional range. The artistic possibilities are beyond our current imagination. Guided crystal growth could create forms of beauty that we have only dreamed about. But how would this partnership function practically? General Rex asked. Corvin and Melodian approaches to work are completely different. Maya smiled. That is exactly why it will work. Corvin engineering provides the precision and strength needed to shape crystal growth. Melodian artistic vision provides the creative guidance that turns engineering into beauty. Neither species could achieve these results alone. Clix watched through the conference room window as the two delegates began discussing technical details with each other instead of arguing about cultural differences. General Rex was asking Artist Prime Lyra about optimal crystal harmonics for structural stability, while Artist Prime Lyra was asking General Rex about engineering tolerances for artistic variation. By the end of the meeting, they were collaborating enthusiastically on a project that would give both species more than either had originally hoped to achieve alone. As the delegates left Conference Room 2, Clix heard General Rex saying to Artist Prime Lyra, "Your people's understanding of crystal harmonics could revolutionize our construction techniques." Artist Prime Lyra replied, "And your people's precision engineering could allow us to create art forms we never thought possible." Clix stared at Maya as she packed up her simple presentation materials, and for the first time he began to understand what he was seeing. Maya was not ignoring cultural differences or trying to find compromises between incompatible approaches. She was finding ways for different cultures to enhance each other while remaining completely true to their own values. The Corvin got to be more Corvin than they had ever been before, building something greater and more challenging than any previous military project. The Melodians got to be more Melodian than they had ever been before, creating art more beautiful than any previous natural formation. Maya's simple human clothes were not a sign of cultural insensitivity. They were a signal that she was not competing in anyone else's cultural framework, which allowed her to see practical solutions that transcended cultural competition entirely. For the first time since Maya's arrival, Clix began to wonder if the humans might have advantages that none of the other species had recognized yet. Six months after Maya's arrival, Director Park called a meeting with all the senior staff at Nexus Corporate Solutions. The conference room was filled with beings from dozens of different species, all wearing their most elaborate ceremonial attire except for Director Park and Maya, who sat at the head of the table in their simple human business clothes. Klix had been promoted to Senior Administrative Coordinator, a position that allowed him to observe the daily operations of the company more closely. What he had learned during those months had changed his understanding of everything he thought he knew about effective diplomacy. "Our success rate has increased by 300% since Maya joined our team," Director Park announced to the assembled staff. "We are now handling cases that other firms consider impossible, and our client satisfaction ratings are the highest in the galactic corporate consulting industry." Around the table, alien staff members who had initially mocked Maya's appearance now looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to genuine respect. The change had not happened overnight, but gradually, as case after case demonstrated that her methods produced results that traditional diplomatic approaches could not achieve. "I called this meeting to explain why Maya's approach works so well," Director Park continued, "and to help all of you understand the principles that make humans uniquely effective at interspecies problem-solving." Artist Prime Lyra, who had become a regular client since the Corvin Melodian mining success, spoke from her position at the table. "Director Park, with respect, we would like to understand this ourselves. Maya's methods appear to violate every principle of effective negotiation that our species have developed over thousands of years, yet somehow she achieves better results than negotiators with decades of experience." Director Park nodded. "That observation is exactly the key to understanding the human advantage. Maya's methods work precisely because they operate outside the frameworks that define traditional interspecies negotiation." Klix leaned forward, his crystalline structure refracting the light in patterns that indicated intense attention. During his months of observation, he had developed theories about Maya's success, but he wanted to hear Director Park's explanation. "Every species in this room evolved from worlds with relatively stable environments and homogeneous cultures," Director Park said. "Corvin society developed on high-gravity worlds with consistent geological conditions. Melodian culture emerged from planets where crystal formations provided stable artistic inspiration for millions of years. Vorthan civilization grew in underground networks that remained unchanged for eons." Director Park gestured toward Maya. "Humans evolved on a world with wildly different environments and dozens of separate cultures that developed completely different approaches to survival and social organization. While other species developed deep expertise in specific cultural frameworks, humans developed the ability to function effectively across multiple frameworks simultaneously." General Rex, who had also become a regular client, spoke in his characteristically direct manner. "Are you suggesting that human cultural instability is actually an advantage in diplomatic situations?" "Not instability," Maya interjected quietly. "Adaptability. Humans do not have one correct way of doing things because our planet taught us that there is no universal correct way. There are only solutions that work better or worse for specific situations." Director Park smiled at Maya's explanation. "Exactly. When Maya walks into a negotiation wearing simple business clothes instead of species-specific ceremonial attire, she is sending a signal that she is not competing within anyone's cultural hierarchy. This allows other species to focus on practical problem-solving instead of cultural positioning." Klix thought about all the negotiations he had observed over the past months. In every case, Maya's approach had been the same. Ignore the ceremonial elements that other species use to establish relative status, focus entirely on understanding what each party actually wanted to accomplish, then find ways for those goals to enhance each other rather than compete. "But how do humans develop this ability?" asked Administrator Vell, a Lumine whose energy patterns indicated deep curiosity. "Cultural adaptability cannot simply emerge without some evolutionary pressure that rewards it." Maya considered the question for a moment. "Humans spent most of our evolutionary history moving between different environments and encountering different cultures. The humans who survived were the ones who could quickly understand new situations and find ways to cooperate with groups that had completely different approaches to survival. So when Maya encounters a conflict between species with incompatible cultural values," Director Park added, "her instinct is not to choose which culture is correct or to find a compromise between them. Her instinct is to find a practical solution that allows both cultures to be more successful than they could be separately." Around the table, Klix could see understanding beginning to dawn on faces and in body language patterns. The alien staff had spent months trying to figure out what cultural techniques Maya was using, when the real answer was that she was not using cultural techniques at all. Ambassador Vex, who had been present during Maya's first day, spoke thoughtfully. This suggests that human diplomatic advantages are not just individual talents, but species-wide capabilities that emerge from your evolutionary background. That is correct, Director Park confirmed. And it explains why human negotiators are becoming increasingly popular throughout the galaxy. Other species are beginning to understand that humans can solve problems that traditional diplomatic approaches cannot handle. Maya looked around the table at the assembled beings who had once dismissed her as inappropriately dressed and culturally insensitive. The galaxy is becoming more connected every year. Species that never interacted before are now working together on projects that require unprecedented cooperation. Traditional diplomacy, which focuses on managing relationships between 2 or 3 cultures, is not sufficient for the complex multi-species challenges we face today. Klix realized that Maya was describing exactly what had happened during the Hegemony Trade Alliance negotiation. 6 different species with completely incompatible requirements had been stuck in traditional diplomatic approaches that tried to balance competing cultural values, when what they really needed was practical innovation that transcended cultural competition entirely. Humans represent a new approach to interspecies relations, Director Park said. Not diplomacy based on cultural expertise, but problem-solving based on practical adaptability. As the galaxy becomes more interconnected, this approach becomes more valuable. Artist Prime Lyra's colors shifted to patterns that indicated she was processing new concepts. So when other species hire human negotiators, we are not just getting individual experts, we are getting access to a fundamentally different way of thinking about cooperation. Yes, Maya replied. And the more species that understand this approach, the more effective it becomes. Instead of every negotiation being a competition between cultural frameworks, we can start treating every challenge as an opportunity for different species to enhance each other's capabilities. As the meeting concluded, Klix watched the alien staff members filing out of the conference room with expressions of thoughtful consideration. Many of them were discussing among themselves how they could incorporate elements of Maya's approach into their own work. Klix remained behind as the room emptied, looking at Maya and Director Park as they organized their presentation materials with the same straightforward efficiency they brought to every task. Director Park, Klix said quietly, I owe Maya an apology for my initial reaction to her appearance and methods. Maya looked up from her datapad and smiled. You do not owe me an apology, Klix. You were operating according to the diplomatic standards that had always worked for your species. Now we all understand better approaches that work for multiple species simultaneously. Klix felt something shift in his understanding, not just of Maya, but of what cooperation between species could look like when it was not limited by traditional cultural boundaries. I would like to learn more about these human approaches to problem-solving, Klix said. I would be happy to teach you, Maya replied. The first lesson is that there is always more than one way to solve any problem, and the best solutions usually come from combining approaches that seem incompatible at first glance. As they left the conference room together, Klix realized that his simple black business attire was not a costume or a cultural statement, but a practical tool that allowed focus on substance rather than ceremony. For the first time, he began to understand why that focus was so powerful. 2 years after Maya's arrival at Nexus Corporate Solutions, the Galactic Trade Council announced the most complex negotiation challenge in recorded interstellar history. The Omega Accords would establish trade relationships between 12 different species alliances, creating the framework for economic cooperation that would affect hundreds of worlds and billions of beings across 3 galactic sectors. Every major consulting firm in known space submitted proposals to handle the negotiations. Most proposed teams of dozens of specialists, each expert in the cultural protocols of specific species groups. The proposed ceremonial requirements alone filled hundreds of pages, covering everything from proper greeting rituals to acceptable meeting room configurations for each possible combination of participating cultures. Maya submitted a proposal that was 3 pages long. Director Park called Maya into his office the day after the submission deadline, and she found him reading through a stack of competitor proposals that reached nearly to his waist. The Corellian Corporate Collective is proposing a 6-month preliminary phase just to establish proper ceremonial protocols, Director Park said, gesturing to the papers. The Zentari Diplomatic Institute wants to build a special facility with different cultural zones for each species alliance. The Meridian Group is requesting a full year for cultural sensitivity training before the actual negotiations begin. Maya looked at the enormous stack of documents. And our proposal. Director Park held up Maya's 3-page submission. You are proposing to complete the entire negotiation process in 6 weeks using Conference Room 2 and a standard presentation display. That is correct, Maya replied. The Omega Accords are about establishing practical trade relationships that benefit all parties. The complexity comes from trying to balance 12 different sets of cultural requirements, not from the actual economic challenges involved. Director Park leaned back in his chair. Maya, I have complete confidence in your abilities, but this would be the largest and most visible negotiation in galactic history. If we fail, it will not just damage Nexus corporate solutions. It could set back interspecies cooperation by decades. Maya sat down across from Director Park and looked at him steadily. Director Park, what do you think will happen if the traditional ceremonial approach succeeds? Director Park considered the question. The 12 species alliances would establish trade relationships based on elaborate protocols that maintain cultural separation while allowing limited economic interaction. And what do you think will happen if the traditional ceremonial approach fails? The species alliances would retreat into their separate cultural spheres, and interspecies cooperation would become much more difficult for the foreseeable future. Maya nodded. Both of those outcomes maintain the current assumption that different species can only interact successfully through